Thank you all so much and happy July. And we've got some really interesting stuff to share with you today. Just going to go over some of the interesting metrics that I've been following over the past month. If we haven't met, my name is Cooper Thayer. I am your market trends nerd, and there's a flattering picture of me in front of all my way too many monitors at my desk. And I love to take a dive into Colorado housing markets and talk about it. So let's dive right in. And it wouldn't be a summer 2025 market update if we didn't talk about the difference between the number of active buyers and the number of active sellers. Now, this is really interesting data from Redfin that just came out for last month, showing that we had about a 59% higher number of active sellers in the market last month than active buyers in the Denver metro area. Now, I want you to note this that Redfin actually quantifies a market as a buyer's market if that difference is just 10%. We are at 59. So, by this metric, we are having a pretty significant shift into buyer market territory. Buyers right now are outnumbered by sellers by about 75%. So 1.75 sellers for every buyer. And that has had an impact on inventory. Year to date, statewide, new listings are up about 15% as of last month. Sold listings have remained relatively consistent, up about 2%, but we've seen this net inventory gain of over 30,000 listings on the market statewide, which has really, really increased both our nominal and our relative inventory numbers. So, how does that compare to the rest of the country? Well, last month, Colorado ranked number one in the country for surplus inventory, which is a measure of the number of homes for sale in June versus historically how many homes we've had for sale in June. And Colorado came in at over 60% excess or surplus inventory. Some other states up there with us, mostly in the West, Arizona, Texas, Washington, but also some other key states like Florida, Tennessee are having similar inventory challenges. So it's certainly not an isolated issue, but Colorado is leading the charge in terms of excess inventory that we have on the market. And what does that look like in terms of time or the month supply of inventory? Last month, statewide, single family inventory was about 4.3 months supply. Multifamily had about 5.8 statewide. So overall, we had about a 4.7 month blended inventory supply on the market. And we can see, on the right there, we've got the past 3 years, June 2023 through 2025. We've seen significant increases in both single family and the townhouse condo segments. And we are actually at pretty high record levels right now, right? If you haven't heard it yet, single family. Oh, and I'm just realizing my camera's off. Oh, maybe not. Single family is at the highest level since about September 2014, and multifamily since about November 2013. Well, what impact has this had on prices? Surprisingly, not a huge impact. Prices have been what I'm calling blissfully boring. Over the past year, we've actually seen a decrease in the volatility of sale prices. You can see that blue line there is average close prices. This is from RE Colorado. And we typically have our annual or intra-year variation here. That is the typical seasonal variability with prices. We get these peaks and troughs. But this year, if we look at the start of 2025, where it's been, we've seen less magnitude in that variability intra-year. Now, the big thing to pay attention to, of course, is the difference between the original list price, which is our purple line, and that close price on the blue line. And that's represented by these bars down here. We can see just how big the difference is on average between average list price and average close price. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But we can see that this year we've actually been trending upwards naturally, as you tend to see in the first half of the year, where the average list to close price has been increasing, which is good. So close prices are trending closer towards the original list price, which means less price reductions. But price reductions are still incredibly prevalent in Colorado. In fact, last month we were the second most, the state with the second highest prevalence of price cuts at about 36%, just behind Arizona. And within Colorado, we can see where that dispersion of price reductions is happening. Again, mostly falls in line with population. So Denver led the charge with about 43.6% of listings at a price cut. Colorado Springs, 40%. Pueblo and Greeley in the 30s. Grand Junction in the low 30s. So we are seeing a correlation between the number of listings, the number of people, and the prevalence of price reductions within the state. Now, a conversation that we've been having a lot with our sellers and with other agents in the industry is about price reduction sizing, right? How big of a price reduction is large enough to be impactful? And this is some great data from the wonderful Megan Aller at First American Title. This is looking at the size of price reductions for pending transactions. So comparing the original list price to the last list price when a listing goes pending. And just last month, the most recent week that this is displaying, we saw a $41,000 reduction on average, or about 6.2% between original list prices and the most recent price when a listing goes pending. So, how are we approaching this with our clients? Because it is a difficult conversation. I can tell you that every week I've got 15 listings that I am trying to talk down off of their price. And, you know, a lot of sellers will want to start higher, test the market, and then come down slowly when that may not be the best for them. So, what I've pulled here is two real listings of ours that are under contract now, and we can look at the history and look at the sizing and kind of determine what sizing was big enough to be effective. So here's a listing, beautiful townhouse in Sloan's Lake, started at 745, made our way down with only 0.7 to 2% price reductions. And it took a total of 5 reductions in 112 days on market to find a buyer. Now, keep in mind, remember, our average original list price to pending price is 6.2%. So it took us 5 to get to 4.6%, and that resulted in 112 days on market. Now, alternatively, if we look at a listing that did one single larger price reduction, and of course the nominal amount is 15,000, but as a ratio of the price, it's a lot larger, 4.4%. That only took one reduction to find its buyer and spent half the time on the market as the one with 5 price reductions. So it's difficult to have these conversations with sellers. A lot of times they will want to go down in increments of $5,000 or $10,000, even for $800,000 homes. But the truth is that a 0.5% or a 1% price reduction isn't likely to get it done in this market. And we are seeing a lot more success from price reductions ranging in the 2.5 to 5% or even up to 6% range. So where do we go from here? Obviously a lot of talk about interest rates, a lot of talk about the Federal Reserve. We are seeing a little bit of a battle right now between the Trump administration and the Federal Reserve, more specifically Jerome Powell. And, the Trump administration feels that rates have been up for too long. And not to get political, but we have seen inflation come down a little bit, which is great, but we're still not at that 2% CPI benchmark that the Fed likes to see in order to lower rates to a lower level. So, there's been a lot of talk recently about what might happen if Jerome Powell gets fired. What will the impact be on rates? Well, great article from Realtor.com, and actually on the topic of Logan Mohtashami, he just put out an interview a couple days ago discussing the topic and mentioned that he feels that the Fed should absolutely stay data driven and not politically influenced, because if the economy continues to outperform, which it has, and inflation starts to pick up again, we're not going to see cuts. And the problem with cutting too early is that it will, mortgage rates and bond rates are all based on expectations. They're all based on expectations of inflation. So if we cut rates too early while we're still seeing significant economic growth, what will happen is investors will have higher inflation expectations, which will cause borrowing costs to rise, right? Mortgage rates are not necessarily set by the Fed. They are kind of indirectly, but they're really based on inflation expectations. So really interesting to watch. Definitely stay on top of this. Keep reading the news and see what happens over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be very interesting. The battle there in Washington, D.C. has been heating up. But this is certainly a key topic, and as interest rates always are. But this is really one of the big primary drivers behind it. So what should you be paying attention to? Well, consumer sentiment is something that I have been keeping close tabs on, and that's very important to me. And you can see this year so far, we have had a little bit of a slide down in consumer sentiment, down to almost our lowest level in the 21st century. And what this has really driven us to do as a team with our clients is kind of reframe our conversations to thinking more as an advisor, right? We don't have all the answers. You and I don't know where interest rates are going to go, and it's very difficult to have a conversation when our sellers are asking us, well, when are interest rates going to drop, or even our buyers. And one of the conversations that's quite prevalent right now is, should I continue my listing this year, or should I rent it out for a year and try again next year if the market's better? And an interesting way to approach this is think like your financial advisor. If you're asking your financial advisor if you should make an investment today and if it will pan out in a year, what are they going to say? They're going to say, well, I can't predict the future of the market, but what do you believe in, right? You should invest in stuff that you believe in. So, how we're approaching this conversation is inform your sellers about the market, inform them everything that I just told you, inform them about the interest rate discussions, and say, what is your prediction? Do you feel that rates are going to be lower this year? Because taking a home off the market today and renting it out and going back on the market next year is really just a bet. It's a bet on if mortgage rates are going to move down. And that is a bet on a whole bunch of stuff. There's a lot of different macroeconomic factors that determine that. So when you're having that conversation, put yourself in the shoes of a financial advisor and help guide your sellers through making that decision for themselves based on their own views, right? Our goal as agents is to be in an advisory capacity. It's not to push any political beliefs or economic beliefs on our sellers, but to help guide them to find their own answers. So that is one of the shifts that we've been making in our business to have these difficult conversations and continue on supporting our sellers through what is definitely now a buyer's market. Thank you all so much. That's all I have for you this week. Please feel free to reach out anytime with questions. I'm so sorry I couldn't get my camera working. I wish you could see me, but there's a more flattering picture of me than I look right now. So enjoy that. And thank you all so much. Can't wait to see you next month.